Welcome to Business Morning here on France 24. Let's start with a look at today's main business stories in the world's press. The boss of Deutsche Post, Germany's major postal company, faces a probe for tax evasion. The German daily Handelsblatt reports that Klaus Zumwinkel, chief executive of Deutsche Post and chairman of Deutsche Telekom, is suspected of failing to pay €1 million in taxes and putting the money into a trust in Liechtenstein. Now, police raided Mr. Zumwinkel's home and office yesterday before questioning the executive. He has, though, been released on bail. Air France KLM eyes a US airline merger. The French business daily Les Echos reports that Franco-Dutch airline is planning to take a minority share in the group to be formed by Delta Airlines and Northwest Airlines. The paper notes that under US laws, this share cannot exceed 25%, but still this would give Air France a seat on the group's board and a veto right. Beijing is to spend $1.25 billion to help the regions affected by China's worst winter weather in half a century. That's on the front page of the China Daily. At least 107 people died, and direct economic loss has been estimated at $15 billion. We'll have more on that story with our Beijing correspondent, Henry Morter, later. So, in the United States, a three-day winning streak came to an end on Wall Street after Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke warned that the economy may get a whole lot worse before it gets better. His comments during testimony to the Senate Banking Committee suggested another sizable interest rate cut may be in store when the Fed's governors meet next month. Our business editor, Douglas Herbert, joins me now. You have more, then.
A little bit more here, yeah. What we basically saw here on Thursday in this testimony is we saw the world's most powerful central banker in full damage control mode. You know, a few months ago, they said, yeah, things aren't looking good. We are going to have some speed bumps. Now, to mix metaphors here, he's saying, no, we're going to have some really rough waters ahead before things perhaps start to tick up towards the end of the year. His message basically sluggish growth ahead before the pendulum swings, and sometime perhaps the third or the fourth quarter this year we see some growth. Here's exactly how Ben Bernanke put it.
In part as the result of the developments in financial markets, the outlook for the economy has worsened in recent months, and the downside risks to growth have increased. The virtual shutdown of the subprime mortgage market and a widening of spreads on jumbo mortgage loans have further reduced the demand for housing, while foreclosures are adding to the already elevated inventory of unsold homes.
You know, and sort of to add to this picture here, the problems in the credit sector are really spreading out into other parts of the U.S. economy. We've talked in recent days about auto loans, consumers using their credit cards to make purchases, all sorts of discretionary spending on items that you like to buy. All of this is starting to be affected. On the upside, let's try to find something positive in this. Ben Bernanke said, look, our interest rate cuts, we've been very aggressive in cutting them. They will work. They just take some time to kick in. He had an ally at his side. It was Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson. He talked about what the government's doing on the fiscal side. Those are the tax rebates, the tax breaks for businesses, which will also take some time to kick in. But they say, taken together, our interest rate cuts, our fiscal stimulus, they will give Americans some solace. They just need to sit back, get through this rough patch, and hopefully things will work out.
OK, Douglas Herbert, thank you very much for that. Rupert Murdoch's News Corp has begun tentative talks to take a share in Yahoo. Now, News Corp would swap MySpace, its internet social networking unit, in return for a 30% stake in the internet company. This follows Yahoo's rejection of a takeover by internet giant Google. Rupert Murdoch said last week that his New York-based company isn't interested in acquiring Yahoo, but he didn't rule out the possibility of a deal involving MySpace.
It's the latest twist in one of the biggest takeover battles ever seen in the technology industry. After Microsoft made a $44 billion hostile bid to buy out Yahoo, unceremoniously rejected for being too paltry, News Corp has now entered the fray. Though Rupert Murdoch said his media empire wasn't interested in an outright acquisition of Yahoo, according to his recently acquired Wall Street Journal, he has started tentative talks about merging News Corp's online division, which includes the social networking site MySpace, with the web's leading search engine. A win-win deal yielding Murdoch a 20% stake of Yahoo and allowing it to escape Bill Gates' grasp while maintaining most of its independence. This move is guaranteed to infuriate Microsoft, which is keen to get its hands on Yahoo to create a viable rival to Google. Speaking of Google, most analysts think it might prove the wrench in News Corp's Yahoo strategy.
Ultimately, also remains to be seen what card that Google might pull out of the bag, because I don't think they're just standing around watching, all these developments, which one way or the other could have enormous implications for Google. So I'm sure that Google right now is plotting its own response.
Meanwhile, Yahoo continues to play for time against the ever-mighty Microsoft.
And we stay in the internet world, in Asia this time, where China's biggest internet search engine, Baidu, is doing very well. More on this with our Beijing correspondent, Henry Morton.
Yes, Baidu.com, China's equivalent of Google, has reported a 79% increase in fourth quarter net income, beating analyst expectations after services to find celebrity news and videos attracted customers away from Yahoo. Year-on-year sales doubled to 57 million euros as the company predicted yet another bumper year to come in a nation with 210 million online users. Baidu predicting first quarter sales of up to 55 million euros, which would be a 99% increase on the year before. Staying in China, which is facing a bill of more than $15 billion after the worst snowstorms in half a century wreaked havoc across the country. 24.4 million hectares of farmland were affected by the bad weather and 350,000 homes were destroyed. Insurance companies also suffering as they face claims of up to $140 million. We end in South Korea, where savings at banks rose at their fastest rate in 6 years in January as more retail investors moved money out of equity funds against a backdrop of continued instability in global equity markets. The balance of time deposits at banks rose nearly 7% in January to $310 billion. Those end the stories that are making the business news here in Asia today. Back to you in Paris.
Russia may end its embargo on Georgia. Russia has agreed in principle to reopen its borders with Georgia. Georgia's President Mikhail Saakashvili said yesterday Georgian officials are to travel to Moscow for talks. In exchange, Tbilisi agrees to back Moscow's bid to join the World Trade Organization. The surprise statement signalled a breakthrough in the tense standoff between Russia and its former Soviet territory. Right, before we close this edition, let's have a quick look at the stock markets. And starting with Wall Street, where shares ended sharply lower yesterday after Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke said he saw rather gloomy prospects for the US economy. This morning, the Bank of Japan maintained its super low interest rates unchanged, as expected, amid concern over the global economy. And this is where the Nikkei stands in Tokyo. That's all for Business Morning. Stay tuned with us here on France 24.